I stood frozen on the doorstep as a pregnant woman I'd never seen before asked if she could help me. Behind her, a colorful family calendar hung on the wall with Mike's business trip, written across the days my boyfriend of 2 years had told me he was visiting me. On the refrigerator were children's drawings signed to Daddy and vacation photos of my boyfriend, with his wife and 3 children. A family I never knew existed until that exact moment. Time seemed to stop as my brain struggled to process what my eyes were seeing. The pregnant woman, Mike's wife, I realized with nauseating clarity, was still waiting for my response, her expression shifting from polite inquiry to mild concern. "Are you okay?" she asked, one hand moving protectively to her very pregnant belly. "Do you need to sit down?" I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. How do you explain to a woman that you're her husband's long-distance girlfriend of 2 years? That you flew across the country to surprise the man you love at what you thought was his new apartment, only to discover his entire life is a fabrication? "I'm sorry," I finally managed. "I think I have the wrong address." But even as I spoke, I saw his keys hanging on a hook by the door. Keys with the distinctive MIT keychain I had given him last Christmas. There was no mistake. This was Mike's home, his real home, with his real family. A life he had meticulously hidden from me for 2 years, while building what I now realized was a completely fictional relationship. I turned and walked, then practically ran, back to my waiting Uber, the flowers and wine I'd brought still clutched in my trembling hands. As the car pulled away, I caught a glimpse of the woman still standing in the doorway, looking confused. My entire reality had just collapsed, and she didn't even know her world was about to do the same. My name is Claire, and until that moment on the doorstep, I believed I was in a committed, loving relationship with Mike Bennett, a 34-year-old technology executive I met at a conference in Boston 2 years ago. I work in UX design for a mid-sized tech company in Seattle. My career has always been important to me. I've prioritized professional growth and independence, building a life I'm proud of with a close circle of friends, a condo I purchased myself, and work that challenges and fulfills me. Relationships had always taken a back seat to these priorities, which perhaps explains why I was particularly vulnerable to Mike's deception. We met at the Future of AI conference where I was presenting a panel on ethical design considerations in AI interfaces. Mike was a keynote speaker, discussing implementation strategies for enterprise companies. He was brilliant, articulate, and surprisingly humble, given his obvious expertise. When he approached me after my panel with thoughtful questions about my presentation, the professional admiration was immediate and mutual. "Your perspective on anticipatory design ethics is fascinating," he said, as we continued our discussion over coffee. "Most people focus on the technical implementations without considering the psychological implications." That initial professional conversation evolved into personal connection as we discovered shared interests beyond technology: rock climbing, documentary films, science fiction literature, and ambitions to eventually start our own companies. He was staying an extra day in Boston after the conference, and we spent it exploring the city together, visiting the MIT campus where he had earned his master's degree, finding a hole-in-the-wall Vietnamese restaurant, and talking for hours about everything from childhood memories to future aspirations. "I'm based in Boston and you're in Seattle," he said, as we exchanged numbers at the end of that day. "But I'd like to keep talking, if you're interested." What began as occasional texts about industry news and book recommendations quickly evolved into daily conversations, video calls, and an increasingly personal connection. By the 3rd month, our communication had an undeniably romantic dimension, though we hadn't seen each other in person since the conference. "I think we should figure out if this connection translates to the real world," Mike suggested during one of our video calls. "I have a business trip to Portland next month. Seattle's just a short flight away. Maybe I could extend the trip by a weekend?" That first reunion confirmed what our virtual connection had suggested. We had chemistry that extended beyond intellectual compatibility. The weekend was perfect, hiking in the mountains outside Seattle, cooking together in my condo, staying up late talking about our dreams for the future. By Sunday evening, I was certain this relationship had potential despite the geographical challenges. "I want to make this work," Mike said as he prepared to leave for his flight. "The distance isn't ideal, but I think what we have is worth the effort." And so began our long-distance relationship. We established a rhythm that worked with our busy careers. Video calls several times a week, daily texts, and in-person visits every 4-6 weeks. Sometimes Mike would fly to Seattle. Other times I would visit Boston. During my trips east, we always stayed at what Mike described as his friend's apartment, a stylish one-bedroom in Cambridge that he claimed to borrow when he had visitors. "My place is being renovated," he explained during my first visit. "The timing is terrible, but Jason's out of town for a conference and offered his apartment." The renovation explanation evolved over subsequent visits. Delays with contractors, discovering additional problems, briefly subleasing while looking for a better location. There was always a plausible reason why we couldn't stay at his place, and I never questioned these explanations. Why would I? Everything else about our relationship seemed transparent and authentic. Mike's job as an executive at a growing tech company involved frequent travel, which conveniently explained his ability to visit Seattle regularly. He would combine business trips with weekend extensions to maximize our time together. During these visits, he integrated seamlessly into my life, meeting my friends, joining my weekend hiking group, attending work events as my +1. He was charming, attentive, and seemingly invested in building connections with the important people in my life. I met some of Mike's colleagues during my Boston visits, usually dinners with his team or drinks with work friends. They clearly knew him well professionally and treated our relationship as established and significant. This further validated my perception of our relationship as serious and committed, despite the geographical separation. After a year together, we began tentatively discussing the future. Mike mentioned the possibility of his company opening a West Coast office, which might allow him to relocate to Seattle. We researched neighborhoods together, talking about areas that would be convenient for both our commutes. I introduced him to my parents when they visited Seattle, and he spoke about taking me to Connecticut to meet his family when schedules aligned. "I'm not great at relationships," Mike confessed during one of our deeper conversations. "My parents' divorce was pretty traumatic, and I've always been focused on my career. But with you, I can actually imagine building a life together." These vulnerable admissions, his difficult childhood, his previous relationship failures, his workaholic tendencies, further convinced me of his authenticity. He appeared to be sharing his true self, flaws and all. In reality, he was constructing an elaborate character tailored to appeal to me while explaining away the inconsistencies in his availability. By our second anniversary, I considered us to be in a committed, serious relationship with concrete plans for eventually eliminating the long-distance aspect. I had a key to what I thought was his apartment, actually his friend Jason's place, I later discovered. We had met each other's friends. We had inside jokes, rituals for our reunions, and the comfortable shorthand of a couple who know each other well. I never suspected I was involved with a married man. Never imagined that the dedicated partner who sent good morning texts daily and remembered tiny details from our conversations was simultaneously maintaining a completely separate life with a wife and children. The deception was so complete, so masterfully executed, that discovering the truth felt like waking up to find I'd been living in a simulation. Last month, Mike shared exciting news during one of our video calls. "I finally found the perfect apartment and signed a lease," he said, his enthusiasm apparent even through the screen. "No more crashing at friends' places when you visit." He sent photos of a beautiful brownstone apartment with high ceilings, original woodwork, and modern furnishings. "It's in Brookline, not far from downtown," he explained. "Great neighborhood, close to the T, with that independent bookstore I told you about just around the corner." I was genuinely happy for him, and selfishly pleased that our Boston visits would now include staying at his actual home rather than borrowed accommodations. The photos showed a distinctly bachelor-style apartment, minimal decorations, sleek furniture, a well-equipped kitchen that aligned with Mike's enthusiasm for cooking. Nothing in the images suggested it was anything other than the home of a single professional man. "I'm furnishing it with us in mind," he added, a comment that warmed me with its implication of future togetherness. "The guest room can double as your office space when you visit for longer periods." We discussed his design choices, his neighborhood, and tentative plans for my next visit, scheduled for 3 weeks later. It all seemed so normal, so natural, so honest. A week after this conversation, a major client unexpectedly canceled a presentation I was scheduled to deliver in Portland. Suddenly, I had a free weekend, something rare in my typically packed calendar. An impulsive idea took hold. I could surprise Mike with a visit to his new place, perhaps help him settle in and celebrate this milestone together. Before I could overthink it, I booked a last-minute flight to Boston. I had Mike's new address. He'd sent it when forwarding some mail that had arrived for him at my apartment after his last visit. I texted him that morning with a casual deception of my own. "Heading to my parents' for the weekend. Mom needs help with some house projects. Talk Sunday night?" His response came quickly. "Family time is important. I'll miss our Saturday call, but have a great weekend. Love you." The "love you" made me smile. We had exchanged those words 6 months into our relationship, during a weekend in Seattle when Mike had surprised me with tickets to a sold-out exhibit I'd mentioned wanting to see. The memory reinforced my excitement about surprising him with this visit. My flight landed in Boston at 1:30 p.m. I stopped for flowers and a bottle of wine, a housewarming gift for the new apartment, then took an Uber to the address Mike had given me. As we drove, I noticed we were heading into a residential suburb rather than the Brookline neighborhood Mike had described. I double-checked the address, wondering if I had made a mistake, but the street and number matched what he had sent. We pulled up to a charming colonial-style home in Newton, a family neighborhood with tree-lined streets and well-maintained yards. This was definitely not the urban brownstone from the photos. My initial reaction was confusion rather than suspicion. Had Mike given me the wrong address accidentally? Was this perhaps his friend's place where he was staying temporarily until his apartment was ready? I thanked the driver and approached the house, still assuming there was a logical explanation for the discrepancy. The yard had children's toys scattered about, a bicycle with training wheels, a plastic slide, a half-deflated soccer ball. I remember thinking Mike must be house-sitting for someone with kids, or perhaps this was a relative's home. It never occurred to me, not even for a moment, that this was actually Mike's permanent residence, the home he shared with his wife and children. The possibility was so far outside my conception of our relationship that my mind couldn't even formulate the hypothesis. I rang the doorbell at approximately 2 p.m. on Saturday. After a moment, the door opened to reveal a visibly pregnant woman in her early 30s, with a toddler peeking around her legs. She had long auburn hair pulled back in a casual ponytail, wore leggings and an oversized sweater that accommodated her pregnancy, and had the harried but content expression of a busy mother. "Can I help you?" she asked pleasantly. And that's when my world collapsed. Standing on that doorstep, flowers and wine in hand, I experienced a moment of cognitive dissonance so profound it felt like physical vertigo. The pregnant woman was looking at me expectantly, waiting for me to explain my presence at her home, while my brain frantically tried to process what I was seeing. Behind her, the entry hallway opened to a living room and kitchen beyond. The interior was nothing like the modern, minimalist apartment in Mike's photos. This was unmistakably a family home, comfortable furniture designed to withstand children, toys organized in colorful bins, a refrigerator covered with children's artwork and family photos. Even from the doorway, I could see the large calendar hanging on the kitchen wall, with Mike's business trip written across the days he was supposedly in Seattle visiting me. In one of the family photos visible on the refrigerator, Mike stood with this woman and 3 children at what appeared to be a beach vacation, his arm around her shoulders, all of them smiling at the camera. "I'm sorry," I managed to say, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. "I must have the wrong address. I'm looking for Mike Bennett?" Her expression remained friendly. "Yes, this is the Bennett residence. Mike's not here right now. He's on a business trip until Tuesday. Are you one of his colleagues? Tuesday, the day he was scheduled to return from his visit to Seattle to see me. Yes, I lied reflexively, unable to form a more coherent response. I was just in town and thought I'd drop by. That's so nice. I'm Jessica, Mike's wife, she said, extending her hand. Would you like to come in? He's not here, but I can give him a message when he calls tonight. Wife. The word struck like a physical blow. And pregnant, very pregnant, perhaps 7 or 8 months along, which meant Mike had not only maintained a marriage throughout our entire relationship, but had also conceived another child during that time. I glanced past her into the home, taking in more details that confirmed my worst fears. A framed wedding photo on a side table showed Mike and Jessica in formal attire, looking young and radiantly happy. Children's shoes and jackets hung on hooks by the door, sized for various ages. A handmade mug labeled World's Best Daddy sat on a side table near a comfortable-looking reading chair. The toddler clinging to Jessica's leg, a boy with Mike's distinctive blue eyes and dimpled smile, stared at me curiously. "Who's that, Mommy?" he asked, pointing at me without subtlety. "This is Daddy's friend from work," Jessica explained patiently. "She came to say hello, but Daddy's not home right now." Friend from work. The casual label applied to what I had believed was a profound, committed relationship of 2 years hit me like another blow. In this house, his real house, I was reduced to a professional acquaintance, someone who might reasonably stop by with flowers and wine on a Saturday afternoon. "Are you okay?" Jessica asked, her expression shifting to concern. "You've gone quite pale." "I'm fine," I lied, my voice barely audible. "Actually, it's not important. I shouldn't have stopped by unannounced. Please don't mention it to Mike. I wouldn't want him to think I was being unprofessional." "If you're sure," she said hesitantly. "Can I at least tell him who stopped by?" "No, really, it's fine. I apologize for the intrusion." I turned and walked back to my Uber, which thankfully was still waiting as I had asked the driver to give me a few minutes. Once inside the car, I managed to give the driver instructions to take me to the nearest hotel before the trembling overtook my entire body. "Are you okay, miss?" the driver asked, watching me in the rearview mirror with concern. "No," I answered honestly, "but I will be." I spent that night in a Boston hotel room, alternating between devastating sobs and periods of numb shock. The flowers and wine I had brought sat untouched on the desk, a pathetic reminder of my naivety. Every memory, every conversation, every promise from the past 2 years was suddenly cast in a sinister new light. The man I loved, the man I had planned to relocate my entire life for, was not just unavailable, but living an elaborately constructed lie. During one brief period of relative clarity, I opened my laptop and began searching social media for Jessica Bennett. I found her easily. Her Instagram account was public, filled with family photos and the daily chronicles of a busy mother of 3, soon to be 4. According to her posts, she and Mike had been married for 10 years and had children aged 8, 6, and 3, with another due in 2 months. The timeline was devastating. Their entire marriage predated our meeting. Their youngest child had been conceived and born during our relationship. Their current pregnancy had likely been confirmed around the time Mike and I were discussing potential neighborhoods in Seattle for our future together. I scrolled through Jessica's feed like a digital masochist, absorbing the evidence of the family life Mike had completely concealed from me. Birthday celebrations, family vacations, holiday traditions, a fully formed domestic existence that made my relationship with Mike seem like a shadow by comparison. Curiously, Mike's own social media had always been minimal and professionally focused. He had explained this as a privacy preference. "I'd rather live my life than document it," he had said, a statement I had found refreshingly authentic at the time. Now I recognized it as a calculated strategy to maintain his deception. The business trips to Seattle had aligned perfectly with his visits to me. The friend's apartment he stayed at when I visited Boston was likely an Airbnb or a short-term rental. The brownstone photos he'd sent of his new place, were clearly lifted from a real estate listing. I found the original posting with a quick search, an apartment that had nothing to do with Mike. As I pieced together the extent of his deception, I was struck by how comprehensive and methodical it had been. This wasn't a relationship that had accidentally evolved beyond appropriate boundaries. This was a deliberately constructed parallel life, maintained with meticulous attention to detail and consistent investment over years. That evening, as I sat surrounded by hotel room tissues and room service I couldn't eat, Mike texted me, "How are the house projects going with your mom? Miss you." I stared at his message, contemplating how to respond. Part of me wanted to explode, to unleash 2 years of betrayed love and rage. Another part wanted answers, explanations, some rationalization that could make sense of how thoroughly I'd been deceived. In the end, I simply wrote, "I'm in Boston. I met Jessica today. Don't contact me again." His response was immediate. "I can explain. Please let me call you." I blocked his number. Later that night, after hours of agonized reflection, I realized that Jessica deserved to know the truth as much as I had. While I had discovered her existence accidentally, she remained unaware of mine, or at least unaware of the true nature of my relationship with her husband. I found her email through a PTA website listed on her social media and sent a brief message. "Jessica, I apologize for the intrusion. The woman who came to your door today wasn't Mike's colleague. I've been in a relationship with Mike for 2 years, believing he was single. I had no idea he was married with children until I saw your family home yesterday. I'm sending this because I believe you deserve the truth. I've attached screenshots of our conversations and photos together as evidence. I won't contact you again." Within hours, she responded, "Thank you for your honesty. This isn't the first time, but it will be the last. Please take care of yourself." Her words suggested a history I hadn't anticipated, that perhaps I wasn't the first affair, just the most recent. That knowledge somehow made everything both better and worse simultaneously. Better because it confirmed that the deficiency was in Mike's character, not in my judgment or worthiness. Worse because it meant his capacity for deception was even greater than I had imagined. I flew back to Seattle the following afternoon, leaving behind the fantasy relationship I had believed in so completely, and returning to a life that suddenly felt hollow and unfamiliar. The weeks following my devastating discovery were a blur of emotional turmoil and practical recalibration. I fluctuated between rage, humiliation, grief, and occasional moments of bizarre detachment, where I could almost view the situation with clinical interest, as if it had happened to someone else. The most immediate challenge was explaining to friends and colleagues why I had suddenly returned from Boston a day early, visibly devastated. I told my closest friends the truth, needing their support to process what had happened. Their reactions ranged from horrified sympathy to protective anger on my behalf. "How could he maintain such an elaborate lie for so long?" my friend Tara asked, echoing the question I had been asking myself repeatedly. The level of calculated deception is sociopathic. "I keep going over everything, looking for the clues I should have seen," I admitted during one particularly difficult evening. "Were there red flags I ignored?" "Don't do that to yourself," my friend Marcus insisted. "This wasn't a case of ignoring warning signs. He deliberately constructed a false reality and invested significant effort in maintaining it. This is on him, not you." My therapist, whom I began seeing weekly after returning from Boston, provided similar perspective. "What you're experiencing is similar to the grief process, but complicated by betrayal trauma," she explained. "The relationship you're mourning never actually existed in the form you believed it did, which creates a unique kind of disorientation." One of the most painful aspects of the aftermath was recognizing how Mike had used my own values and priorities against me. My independence and career focus, qualities I had always considered strengths, had made me the perfect target for his deception. Because I valued my autonomy and didn't need constant contact, I never questioned the limitations on our time together that his secret family necessitated. "He studied you," my therapist observed. He identified what would appeal to you in a partner and crafted his presentation accordingly. He also identified what would make you less likely to question his availability and exploited those traits. This observation was both disturbing and oddly validating. The betrayal wasn't because I had been naive or desperate for connection. If anything, it was because I had been confident enough in my own worth to believe someone would go to extraordinary lengths to be with me, even across distance. 2 weeks after returning to Seattle, I received a hand-delivered letter from Mike. According to the hotel staff, he had arrived in person, asking them to ensure it reached me. The fact that he knew where I was staying — I had moved to a long-stay hotel while my condo was undergoing previously scheduled renovations — was unsettling. Had he flown to Seattle specifically to deliver this? Was he actually in the city, hoping to create an accidental encounter? I held the sealed envelope, tempted to read his explanations, but ultimately deciding against it. I returned it unopened with a note. Any explanation you could offer would benefit you, not me. Please respect my request for no contact. Despite this clear boundary, Mike persisted in attempting communication. He created new email addresses when I blocked his primary one. He sent messages through professional networking platforms. He even contacted mutual acquaintances, asking them to intercede on his behalf. Each attempt reinforced my conviction that his primary concern was managing the consequences of his exposure, not acknowledging the harm he had caused. 4 weeks after the discovery, I received another email from Jessica, this one from a personal account rather than the PTA address. She asked if I would be willing to speak with her, explaining that she was trying to make decisions about her marriage and family with complete information. After careful consideration and consultation with my therapist, I agreed to a phone call. The conversation that followed was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. 2 women comparing notes on their relationships with the same man, one as wife and one as unwitting affair partner. "I want you to know I don't blame you at all," Jessica began, her voice steady but tired. "Mike has done this before, twice that I know of. Each time he promised it was over, that he would get therapy, that our family was his priority." "You knew about other affairs?" I asked, surprised by her matter-of-fact tone. "Yes. The first was 6 years ago, just after our second child was born. The second was 3 years ago, around the time I was pregnant with our youngest. This pattern, it's who he is." "Why did you stay?" I couldn't help asking, though I immediately worried it might sound judgmental. "Children, financial entanglement, the belief that people can change," she listed without defensiveness. "Each time, I convinced myself it was a phase, a midlife crisis, something we could work through. This time is different." She explained that she had filed for divorce the day after receiving my email. The pregnancy complicated matters logistically, but she was firm in her decision. "Your email wasn't actually the first indication this time," she admitted. "I found receipts for jewelry I never received, saw strange charges from cities he wasn't supposed to be visiting. I was already suspicious, but seeing concrete evidence from you, someone clearly in a committed relationship rather than a brief fling, that was the confirmation I needed." We talked for nearly an hour, filling in gaps in each other's understanding of who Mike really was. Jessica shared that Mike had returned home early from his business trip after receiving my text, attempting to get ahead of the situation with a partial confession. He had characterized our relationship as an inappropriate friendship that got out of hand, rather than the fully developed romantic partnership it had been. "He's a practiced liar," Jessica said with remarkable composure. "He lies with such conviction that sometimes I think he believes his own version of reality." Before ending our call, Jessica said something that has stayed with me during the healing process. "The greatest disservice we can do ourselves is to allow his deception to make us doubt our own judgment. You didn't choose to be deceived. I didn't choose to be betrayed. The only one who made choices here was Mike." It's been 6 months since that devastating day on the doorstep in Newton. In that time, I've learned more about Mike's deceptions through brief, painful correspondence with Jessica, who reached out periodically as she navigated her divorce proceedings. Apparently, there had been other women before me, at least 2 long-term affairs that Jessica knew about, possibly more that never came to light. Mike seemed to operate with a pattern, establishing relationships with women in different cities, using his frequent business travel as cover, maintaining each relationship just seriously enough to satisfy emotional and physical needs without creating expectations he couldn't manage. The apartment photos he had sent me belonged to a listing in a building where he had legitimately rented a unit, not for living in, but specifically for conducting his affairs. According to Jessica, he had maintained this arrangement for years, justifying the expense as a private office space for when he needed to work without family distractions. Most disturbing was learning that some of Mike's colleagues were aware of his double life. Not the full extent of his deceptions, perhaps, but enough to know he wasn't being truthful with either his wife or his girlfriends. Their silence had enabled his behavior, a brotherhood of secrecy that protected him rather than warning those he was deceiving. His boss took him aside after our second child was born, Jessica told me during one of our conversations. Told him to be more discreet because his extracurricular activities were becoming noticeable. Not that he should stop, just that he should be more careful. This revelation explained why Mike had been so selective about which colleagues he introduced me to during my Boston visits. The team members I met were either new employees unaware of his reputation or individuals who tacitly approved of his deceptions. I've cycled through all the expected emotions: humiliation at being so thoroughly deceived, rage at the years wasted on a fictional relationship, grief for the future I had planned with someone who never truly existed, and fear that I might never trust my own judgment again. My friends have been supportive, though I can sometimes see the unasked question in their eyes. How did you not know? The truth is, the deception was so comprehensive, so skillfully maintained, that there were genuinely no red flags I ignored, only carefully constructed explanations that seemed reasonable at the time. The most painful aspect has been recognizing that while I've lost a relationship that never really existed, Jessica and her children have lost the foundation of their actual lives. According to our last exchange, her divorce was finalized shortly before she gave birth to their fourth child, a daughter that Mike has seen only twice since her birth. I've started therapy to process this experience and understand how to move forward without carrying crippling trust issues into future relationships. My therapist has helped me recognize that trusting someone who presented no evidence of untrustworthiness isn't naivety, it's normal human behavior. The absence of trust isn't wisdom, she told me during a particularly difficult session. It's isolation. The goal isn't to never trust again, it's to trust with appropriate verification, to recognize that transparency isn't an unreasonable expectation in a committed relationship. I've also thrown myself into work and reconnected with local friends I had somewhat neglected while focusing on my long-distance relationship. 3 months after the discovery, I accepted a promotion that would have been incompatible with the relocation plans Mike and I had discussed, a small victory in reclaiming my life path. Last month, I received an unexpected package from Jessica, a copy of a book on healing from betrayal that had helped her, along with a brief note. Thought you might find this useful. The part about reframing the experience not as a failure of judgment, but as an encounter with someone skilled at manipulation, was particularly helpful to me. I'm relocating to Chicago with the children to be near my family. Mike has been reassigned to his company's London office. Apparently, his professional reputation finally caught up with him too. I hope you're finding peace and rebuilding. We deserve better stories than the ones he wrote for us. Her note crystallized something I had been struggling to articulate, that Mike hadn't just deceived me about his marital status. He had actively created a false narrative of who I was within our relationship. He had written a character for me to play, the independent career woman who valued her autonomy so much she wouldn't question his limited availability, the modern partner who didn't need traditional relationship milestones, the patient girlfriend willing to endure long-distance hardships for an eventual future together. In reality, I would have preferred more regular contact, had wanted more integration in each other's daily lives, had made compromises in my own preferences to accommodate what I thought were legitimate constraints. I wasn't actually the perfectly independent, endlessly patient character he had created. And perhaps more importantly, I didn't have to be that person to be worthy of love. In retrospect, there were subtle inconsistencies I might have questioned had I not been so emotionally invested. The lack of spontaneous video calls from his home, the carefully controlled visits, the absence of any unexpected interruptions during our conversations that might reveal his family life, his reluctance to be tagged in social media posts, the selective introductions to colleagues and friends. But the truth is, I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was attentive, emotionally available, seemingly transparent about his life and feelings. The man I fell in love with was entirely fictional, a character created specifically to appeal to me while requiring minimal effort to maintain alongside his actual life. I still don't understand how someone can compartmentalize so completely, how Mike could profess love to me while betraying both me and his family daily for years. The capacity for such sustained deception is beyond my comprehension, and perhaps that's for the best. Understanding his psychology too well might mean sharing aspects of it. What I do know is that I'm gradually reclaiming my life and my ability to trust, not others, necessarily, but myself. The woman who stood on that doorstep 6 months ago died in that moment, but the woman emerging from this experience is more self-aware, more compassionate toward other victims of deception, and ultimately more resilient than she ever knew she could be. 3 months ago, I began dating again, cautiously, with clearer boundaries and more direct questions about relationship expectations. I'm transparent about my experience without allowing it to define me, and I've found that most people respond with empathy rather than judgment. My friends joke that I now have the world's most effective filtering question for first dates. Are you married with children? The ability to laugh about this, even darkly, feels like progress. Last week, I received a job offer that would take me to our company's London office for a year-long project. 6 months ago, I would have declined immediately, not wanting to create additional distance in my relationship with Mike. Today, I accepted without hesitation, recognizing it as both a professional opportunity and a chance to experience life abroad. As I prepare for this new adventure, I find myself reflecting on a quote from the book Jessica sent. Some people come into our lives as blessings, others as lessons. The trick is learning to distinguish between the two without becoming so wary that we miss out on either. The lesson Mike taught me wasn't that trust is foolish, but that trust should be accompanied by transparency. Not constant verification or suspicious questioning, but a reasonable expectation that someone who claims to love you will present themselves authentically, even when that authenticity is complicated or inconvenient. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand how someone could maintain such an elaborate deception for so long, but I do know that his capacity for dishonesty reflects his character, not my worth or discernment. The woman who stood frozen on that doorstep 6 months ago couldn't see that truth clearly, but I can. And that, more than anything, feels like healing. TLDR. After 2 years of long-distance dating, I surprised my boyfriend at his new address only to discover he was actually married with 3 children and another on the way. His entire identity and our relationship had been an elaborately maintained fiction. Edit. Thank you all for the overwhelming support. To answer some common questions. 1. Yes, I've been tested for STIs. All clear, thankfully. 2. I did consider confronting Mike directly, but ultimately decided no explanation could ever be satisfactory. 3. Jessica and I have had limited contact. We're both processing our own trauma, but she's been remarkably kind considering the circumstances. Edit 2. Several people have suggested I was naive to accept the friend's apartment explanation for so long. In hindsight, obviously yes. But please remember that these deceptions didn't happen all at once. They were introduced gradually over months, each building on established trust. Manipulation at this level is insidious precisely because it's designed to bypass rational skepticism. Update. 3 months later, I'm doing much better now. Therapy has been incredibly helpful. I've accepted a year-long position in our London office, and I'm excited about the fresh start. I've learned Jessica finalized her divorce and moved with her children to be near her family support system. Mike apparently was transferred to his company's London office, ironic given my upcoming move. But I'm told he's working in a different industry sector, so our paths shouldn't cross. Sometimes healing looks like recognizing that while you couldn't control what happened to you, you can control what happens next.